morning, everyone. It's my first visit to Bahrain, and it's been wonderful. I have been struck by the friendliness of everyone and the modernity, not only in the architecture, but in the thought over here. So thank you for having me, listening to me, and allowing me to partake in the intellectual candy that today is. I wanted to start with a slide about disruption that I am sure many of you have already seen. It makes the very strong point that disruption isn't just something for the future, but that in many industries it has happened already. So for example, the world's largest taxi company, valued at over $70 billion at the recent raise, doesn't even own any taxis. The world's largest accommodation provider, by bed nights booked, doesn't own any bricks and mortar. That would be Airbnb. The first one, of course, Uber. And so one can carry on. The most valuable retailer has no inventory, Alibaba. The world's largest movie house doesn't even own any cinemas. These are categories that 10 years ago arguably didn't even exist, and now the biggest player in each of these industries has completely disrupted it. And obviously the question is, if it can happen in software, if it can happen in media, if it can happen with the largest phone companies in the world, that the single largest player doesn't own any infrastructure, why are we as banks so very different? Why have we not been disrupted yet? Or is it starting to happen? If you had had a conference like this, let's say about taxis, would they have thought that they weren't going to be disrupted, and then it suddenly happened to them? So I'd like to tell you a few stories, if I may, for the rest of my few minutes. The first one is that I used to manage a very large and very successful bank. To put it in context, we had 33,000 employees and operations in more than 10 countries in the world. It was highly profitable, grew profits in double digits every year. When I left as CEO, our return on equity after tax was just below 40%. So it was a very, very large and successful player. I've left it about 5 years ago and became a venture capitalist. I didn't want to have anything to do with banking, largely because I never understood how you could leave one team and join another so quickly. You know, when a player leaves Barcelona, how can it play for Real Madrid the next week, sometimes against their own players? So I became a venture capitalist and immediately got emails. People wanted to come have coffee with me. And I love coffee, but you just can't drink all those coffees. There are so many people out there with ideas. So what I learned out of that is that there are too many people out there that just follow their passion. If I had to go back to a school today and I were asked to give advice to the kids there, and maybe this is advice to you for your kids, I would say, don't just follow your passion. There are too many people out there that have dreams and ideas and a passion, but they haven't yet figured out that they're good at something. In fact, if you asked about 80% of kids, they want to be DJs, soccer players, celebrities, or pop artists. But all of those are, by definition, small categories. There are only so many soccer players. There can only be so many celebrities at any given moment. And I just want to play you a quick video of somebody who clearly was passionate about something, but didn't have the inherent ability to do it, if I may.
Don't let the sun go down on me yet. Although I search myself, there's always someone else I see. I just allow a fragment of your life to wander free. Oh, but losing everything is like the sun going down on me.
Put the poor guy out of his misery. So that was an example of someone following their passion. They thought they could sing, but they weren't good at it. The other thing I saw as a venture capitalist is that there are a whole lot of apps out there that are actually pretty meaningless. People that came up and said, I've got an app that can take a picture of my cat and make it look different, or my app can send messages and they disappear after a few seconds, or food ratings, things that don't really mean anything, things that don't change the world. There's the famous venture capitalist, Peter Thiel, who said, we wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters. Obviously he was having a go at Twitter there, but he's saying we really wanted something that changes the world, and look what most of the people in the world are bringing. So if you had to ask me what makes a good business, what makes a good startup, the ideas I wanted to do as venture capitalist, you would have to be at the center of all three of these rings. Yes, it's great if you're passionate about it, but you also have to be good at it. But most importantly, do something that the world really needs. That would be my advice to the youth and my advice to any startups. Now, the wonderful thing about our profession, your profession, is that there are some very real problems out there, very real stories of people that can be helped, and to speak to your point, and things that give purpose to what we do. I've listed some. Bank fees. If you can reduce bank fees, particularly for poor people, they can get access to the financial system. Remittances, the amount of people that work in other countries and want to send money home. Where I come from in South Africa, it's still done largely by cash. And it's money that is handed to a taxi operator who hands it to another taxi operator until it eventually gets to the other country. Your typical fee there is 30% of the amount. Now imagine working very hard every day and the first 3 of your 10 hours in the day actually doesn't go to your family, but just to the taxi operator. The amount of paperwork required to open an account, microcredit, sometimes needed to start small businesses, the cost of cash, fraud, when people suffer from that and their life savings are taken away from them. Now, each of these could be the reason to start a separate business. Many of those are the ones that persuaded us as a new team to start a new bank called Bank Zero. So quickly, if I may just share with you where the name came from. The numerical system, which was developed in the Arab world, developed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. first. Only many, many years later did mathematicians invent zero. But of course, when zero came into the party, into the mathematics world, it changed everything. Mathematics was changed completely by zero. And so, in a humble way, we hope that we as Bank Zero, we know we're not the first bank in the world, but we think it's a bank that can change everything. So that's the first part behind the name. The other reason is that bank fees, where I come from, are far too high. And we want to launch a bank that has no monthly fees, and no transaction fees, and no penalty fees, where it will be free to do banking. And we draw our inspiration there from all the other internet companies. WhatsApp doesn't cost anything, Facebook doesn't cost anything, Instagram, Snapchat. Free is in fact the model of our time. And yet we still think we can build a profitable business while doing things for free. So the problem we're trying to solve, first of all, is fees. If you look at fees, fees is my next slide. If you look at the savings rate, we in our country, unfortunately, don't save. We love to consume. We love to, when our neighbor buys a car, you want to buy a bigger car. When they build a swimming pool, you want to build a swimming pool. So we live a life of consumption. We don't save enough. So we want to launch a bank where people can get better interest rates. And then secondly, our fees are too high. What I've got here is a comparison of fees as a percentage of income. And you can see in our case, it's 4%. There are higher ones like Brazil, but in China, Russia, Canada, Australia, it's at about 1% of income. So not only are our fees high as a percentage of incomes, it's actually also just very high in absolute terms. And we think that's a wonderful problem to compete against and a great positioning for a new bank to come into the market. So those are the two, shall we say, problems we want to solve. And then clearly when you build a new bank, you build it on the new technology that is available. The obvious one is the mobile phone. I bet there are very few people in this room that don't have one of the latest smartphones. And our smartphones are still more expensive, but the cost of smartphones keeps on coming down. Right now, 5 billion of the 7 billion people in the world have phones. Okay, those include feature phones. And the amount of people coming online, this year it will be 2.9 billion that do it via smartphones. Next year, 3.2. By 2020, it will be 3.6. That's by phones alone. So there's this massive rise of people that can use smartphones. And clearly, we wanted to use this new technology to start a new bank. So my insights, if I can share them with you, and remember, this is coming from somebody who had 33,000 staff and had massive technology budgets, is that one can change the world with a very, very small team, provided they are highly competent. So Bank Zero right now is only 10 people, 10 professionals, handpicked, all of them top of their game. All of them ran very big areas. All had to learn to work in a startup again. Many of whom had put in their own capital and have agreed not to work for a salary until we're profitable. So make that point about complete commitment, passion, and keeping costs low. My other insight has been how low the cost of technology out there is. The role of software developers, if you do the right thing, is no longer to develop software. It is to assemble code. You can find really good, open source, free software out there and then put it together. You can get a database system for free. You can get a debit and credit system for free. It is all available out there, and using the most modern technology, you can assemble this. So we have 3 developers in Bank Zero, 3 only, and they've built an entire banking system, an entire app, and right now they're busy integrating with the quite complex but sophisticated payment system of South Africa. The cost of the software will definitely be less than the cost of all of us having breakfast this morning. So with that, we were able to launch a bank. Of course, there's much more enhanced security on a smartphone. We know where the device is. We know through biometrics who the customer is. There's facial recognition, there's PINs. It's far harder to do phishing and a number of ways in which people have been defrauded if you only rely on a phone and a credit card. And finally, there's much richer functionality. And in this instance, it was great having a team of ex-bankers start a startup, because we could go for all those things that we saw were frustrations of our customers. Now, many I can't reveal because we haven't launched yet. We're only launching towards the end of the year. But let me give you a few examples. When you send a WhatsApp message to someone else, you see one tick that it's been successfully sent, another tick that it's successfully arrived, and then those ticks turn blue when somebody's read it. Now, we can mirror exactly that for payments. When has it left your account? When did it hit the other bank? When did the recipient get it? Something is very intuitive in WhatsApp, but you can only do it if you develop the bank from scratch. Another example, in the underserved market, sometimes a smartphone is shared by many people, by family and beyond. Yet most of the apps on a smartphone don't cater for that different people actually use the same device. Now, we've come up with, I'd say, nearly 20 of these things that used to frustrate us as bankers. I'll give you another example, that you can't change the limit on your card depending on where you are, or change the limit for your kid's card. Maybe they're on holiday and they're in trouble, and you can just, with a click of a few buttons, increase the limit on their card and bring it down again. So many, many things that legacy tech didn't allow us to do, we were now able to do as a small team. So richer functionality, real good price competitive, a lean structure, a small team that changes the world. There's a saying about that never underestimate what a small team of competent people can do to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I think the insight to you that run big businesses from me, who now is chairman of a very small one, is it is quite amazing what smaller team you need and how low your cost base can be. So my final slide really is your new competitors, the new fintechs, do not yet have a brand. We have no customer base of yet. We don't have income. And apart from having an app on a phone, we have no channels. These are all things you have that are strength. But what we do have, and what I've now truly experienced, is the tremendous agility to innovate, to bring new functions on board, to challenge. A cost base that surprised even me. I'm not at liberty to divulge the numbers with you, but I cannot tell you low cost it has been to have one open plan office. We don't have an art collection, we don't have a canteen, we don't have reserved parking. People come to work the way I am dressed, are completely informal, but they are truly competent, and the cost is low. Unlimited ability to innovate without having to worry about legacy income streams. I dare say this would be one of the most difficult things if I had to run one of the big banks again, is to go to the board and say, this revenue stream, we have to cut it completely because there are small new competitors that are not offering it. So the innovation that we can have by cutting those revenue streams. And the final thing is purpose. So again, in our little bank, because the capital requirements have been met by the employees putting in the capital, mean that we can truly think long-term, that it's not just about short-term profitability, which we think an institutional investor would have, that we can truly think customer-centric, and that we have a real purpose that we think we can get our country to save on bank fees, and actually get the savings rate of the nation. And I dare say in the long run, that is quite a difficult proposition to compete against if you're a big bank with many people and a high cost base. Thank you very much.